One spark, one thought, one choice at a time. We build the collective. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. We got Mark here for the first time. We got Jason returning. We got James returning. We got Shaun, of course, and I am pumped for this one. So while I am excited, you should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, Fridays for The Collective, Wednesdays for the workshop. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section. We can hit those throughout the show. And of course, if you are not yet signed up for the Reinforcement Loop, there's our weekly newsletter. It goes out after both shows are done, and then you get some awesome information as well as some brain candy to chew on. Other than that, let's get right into the intros, and then we can get right into the conversation because I'm pumped for this one. So, Mark, you're on top. Give us a quick 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff.
All right, thanks. I'm Mark Grdovic. I'm a retired U.S. Army Special Forces officer, retired in 2012. And I currently still live in Florida, supporting the American Special Operations community since then. And I'm also a recent author of a book called Those Who Face Death.
Bam. I like it. Jason, hit us up.
Yep. Jason Cheney, military background, Air Force law enforcement for a number of years. And then I left the early 2000s and started working for a night vision company and also doing some training and travel around, training SWAT teams, helping out on the military side when I can, and just enjoying the training side.
Living the life. I like it. James, how you doing, man?
Good, mate. My computer's struggling a little bit, so if I start glitching, I apologize. But apart from that, James Geering, originally from England, 14 years as a firefighter paramedic here in the US, and host of the Behind the Shield podcast.
Bam. I like it. Shaun, life in the mountains treating you well?
Yeah. James, I was thinking of you there, not in a weird way, this morning when I was out watering my tomatoes. I had my garden hose out and it was all wrapped around a rock, and I'm like trying to unspool it from a rock, and all I could think of as I was doing it, and I did it in slow motion, I've just put it up on Instagram before I came here, all I could think of was James is going to be so embarrassed for me. Because I look like a gong show as I'm trying to get this freaking garden hose going. I am the opposite of a fireman. And so what it made me think of, James, is we've all got our thing that we're all good at, I suppose, in life, but none of us are good at everything. And that was a moment out in my backyard there with a simple garden hose where I realized I am definitely not the man in this environment. So maybe that'll come up somehow in the topic at hand today.
I like it. I like it. Well, we got this right off the bat. Dan C. jumps in, said, "Good morning, gentlemen. We're not here for praise. We're here for the ass kicking," which is always a good way to look at it. Ethos Eras Project. Happy Friday. We made it, folks. Good to see you, buddy. And so the topic of the day, where change begins. This got started when Mark and I were chatting a few weeks ago, and we were talking about how a lot of the greatest ideas come from the guys on the ground, the people right at the where the metal meets the road, or the rubber meets the road. And I was like, that's a great idea for a topic. Let's hit that from all the angles we know, and I'm going to pass it around. So when you guys got the email yesterday and it started the gears in your brains working, what were your first thoughts? James, I'm going to hit you first. You're on the bottom. What were your first thoughts?
All right. Well, firstly, I want to throw back to Shaun. I was attacked by a flying banana earlier, but having seen his video, I had a box cutter in my pocket and was able to defend myself. So I want to thank you for your self-defense tips against fruit. That will be my first comment. And then, yeah, I mean, this is what we're seeing in the fire service. There are some incredible innovations that we glean from other industries, the SCBA, the air pack, where it comes from mining, the education tools and racing world. I don't know if you can still hear me. My computer is glitching all over the place. But when it comes to change, especially in training, in fighting for an environment that improves physical health, mental health, it is definitely the men and women on the ground that are reforging. We have a lot of large organizations that receive a large amount of money, unions and other organizations that we haven't seen a lot of change come from. So usually it's the thought leaders in these departments, the people that are sick and tired of going to funerals in this particular example, that are the ones that really start shaking the tree and forcing change. So it's going to be an interesting conversation today.
I dig it. Jason, how about your first thoughts?
Sorry. Yeah, I think James kind of nailed it on the head coming from the law enforcement side. That's what really, when I first saw it, that's what I started thinking about. Unfortunately, most change happens with tragedy or necessity. Maybe some of those, maybe it's the same. And I think that's hard because like you said, it comes from the bottom. But I think that where I see it create issues is when it's done incorrectly from the bottom. So I think there's probably a process for it, because you can go to somebody and say, hey, I have the best idea in the world, and if it costs money or if it costs time, or if, it's one of those, let's look into it and we'll try to figure out. I battled that so much in my law enforcement career, to the point where that's one of the things that led to me leaving law enforcement, unfortunately, and a lot of good guys leaving law enforcement. James, it's kind of funny, on the fire service side. You said, I guess not funny, but my dad passed away from I was a line of duty death as a fireman from cancer, and his case went so high up that it kind of helped with that whole the precautions and stuff that they're taking now for cleaning gear and making sure that guys are wearing their packs and stuff like that during overhaul, and some of the things those old guys just really didn't pay attention to. So unfortunately, it took a lot of guys like that to help get that changed, but his case was one of those ones that got elevated and helped make that change. So it's kind of cool to be a part of that. And so, yeah, I think that it starts with the bottom, but it has to be done correctly, because you can be very passionate about something and it goes nowhere because you're not doing it correctly.
That's a great point. Mark, what did you come with on this?
When we first started thinking about this topic, or when I first saw the topic, so I start to ask myself, okay, what do I think? And then it dawned on me, I'm like, every organization has to go through some degree of change continuously. I mean, I actually couldn't think of an example of an organization that can just stay the way it is, indefinitely. So there's a band of too much change is bad, too little change is also bad, and then there's the band in the middle that's good. And it made me start to reflect on probably some of my own bad experience, how many people are resistant to the notion of change because it comes with unknown, and that equates to fear. And organizations, there's a danger where organizations, like I said, they resist change, and then put their effort into staying the way they are, because that's comfortable. It might not be efficient, it might not be effective, but it's familiar, as compared to the unfamiliar, fear, and the requirements that come with developing new skills and developing new capabilities.
Fear is a great way to look at this too. I'm digging where this is going, Shaun.
Yeah.
Well, where does change begin? Well, change is always occurring all around us, whether we recognize it or not. Like if we want to scale it down to the atomic level within us, there's change constantly occurring. So how big do we have to scale it up from an atomic level to a noticeable level? Let's make it as big as a skyscraper. You'll notice it if you're looking for it. And I think that's one of the things we should talk about is change is never visible within yourself unless you're looking to create change. So when I was out watering the tomatoes, I did put a caption on the little video of me embarrassingly acting like a fireman. And it was basically this. The title on the video was "Your Resume, ... And then my caption was words to the effect of, look, the tomatoes don't care about your resume. They just want water, man. It's as simple as that. And I think a lot of us kind of show up to our tomatoes are like, I was the man. Look at the t-shirt I'm wearing. I'm going to water you like nobody's business. Tomatoes don't care. They just want to grow. They just want to change. They just want to thrive. And so I think, if I go out to my tomatoes and think I'm a big deal and like, you're not even going to get water, I'm such a big deal. I think some guys actually approach life like that, or some people. And so change is as visible as you want it to be. It'll occur as often as you want it to. And it'll turn into the things that they're supposed to turn into if you apply enough effort. And so where does it all go wrong, I suppose? Where does change go wrong? Well, Jason, as he was speaking, kind of filled in a little gap on my equation of the tomatoes don't care. But eventually the tomatoes will grow, just like Jason's dad's story grew, but it required a timeline. When in the first week after Jason's father's passing, there was no change other than the acute changes within perhaps the immediate family, etc. But change at scale required time. I don't know how many years went by until your dad's efforts made a difference, but it wasn't the day after. It was probably years or decades after. And so we can seek change, but adjacently, we have to align with time. We have to consider time and its extent to truly see what the change looks like at the end.
There's so many good angles on this, and I want to go around again. So, James, I'm going to start back with you. What do you think on everything that's been said so far?
I want to pick up on the word fear. A lot of us, well, all of us, I'm saying a lot of us, all of us come from a profession where we are expected to act without fear or manage our fear when we are on the fireground in a gunfight, whatever our dangerous area looks like. And I think what has been the glaring contrast for me is how people in our profession can be so courageous when it comes to, for example, protecting a stranger in a house fire or, a school shooting. But then you can have either that same individual, or at least that same administration, be so scared when it comes to change. And I've seen this, you are now in a lot of fire departments in America, they're drowning. If you look at some of these news stories, as battalion chief made $1 million this year in California, well, that's because they were working like a dog, filling overtime that needed to be filled. Now, is it healthy? Absolutely not. But it shows that there is an absolute void. Law enforcement, obviously, the same thing. Recruitment and retention is a big deal. And we're both sitting here not wearing the uniform, and both of us cut our journey short, and ultimately to make a difference from the outside. But this is an interesting dichotomy I'm seeing, is that we are from this profession that is brave. We do the things that, only 1% of the population are signing up to do. But then when you ask for that same courage, when it comes to being proactive and making changes that will save lives in uniform and ultimately save many more lives in our community, it's hard to find that same courage, and certainly hard to find humility. So we've got to figure out how we address that disconnect between courage, in the operational side, and really cowardice in the administration side. I'm not saying it's always a chief, sometimes it's union, sometimes it's the rest of the department, but we have to bridge that gap. That courage isn't just make an entry into a burning building. Courage is also going to a city or a county and saying, we need to invest in our people. We can't just keep hiring 18-year-olds to fill the spots and expecting that to solve the problem.
I'm digging this so much. Jason, you got any additional thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with Shaun's timeline, kind of like what he was bringing up to the very end there. I think that I have two examples of this timeline situation, and for me, the timeline exists. I'm saying, but I think that it involves throughout that timeline a very intentional process, like I was talking about earlier, and small steps, right? So the first example I'll use is my sobriety journey. It was out of necessity, had to happen, took the steps. I'm now 3 years into that, and not everything has gotten better, but nothing's gotten worse, right? And it's because I've been taking this whole entire time and taking those steps and being very intentional about what I do, so that I am where I am now, and that's better than yesterday. So I like the timeline analogy, but within that timeline, then now there's things that we have to do to slowly move the ball down the field. And yeah, that's kind of, well, I'll leave it at that and see what everybody else has on there to follow up. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now.
I dig it. That's and I appreciate you sharing that because I mean, it is not an easy journey for sure. I know a lot of people that have worked through it. Mark, you got any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, going back to what something James said, maybe think about it. You know, how organizations, particularly effective organizations, there's a challenge when you have a successful model to want to just reinforce it and stick with it. And it goes back to at least listen to me, hear him talk about the firefighting industry, how similar it is to the military sometimes. That, hey, the environment's changing with or without you, you know, and you can have a successful model, but it's hard to grasp that it's not the model's no longer successful. It just doesn't fit anymore. And I think about the way we're taking care of people, the way we're recruiting people, the way we're training people, the way we're dealing with PTSD. Like, these are realities that require an organization to adapt and change. And I think the comparison of an organization versus an individual, like, because there's two sides to that too. Like, how do we do it as individuals, deal with change, and how do we do it as organizations? I actually do think the older we get and the bigger an organization gets, the more control it has. Control's the wrong word. It can be resistant to change. It can come up with rationalization, or like, if you're a small business or a younger person, you either change or you die. And by die, I mean like you go out of business, you fail. But as you become bigger, you have more control to influence things. And you can actually, I think, convince yourself, we don't need to change. We need to get everybody else to accept our business model. Or I don't really have to adapt, you know, because I've been doing this for 25 years or something like that. So I think it's an interesting thing how success can actually breed complacency, or, again, familiarity.
I'm digging it, Sean. Got any other thoughts?
Yeah, just trying to tie both Jason and Mark together in what they said. As Mark was rounding it out, it kind of made sense to me, so I'm just going to spit it out here. Just real time. It's not very materialistically designed, but here we go. So Jason had said that, his sobriety journey, maybe it's had some ups and downs, and maybe he's not exactly where he wants to be right now. That's kind of what I heard in his voice to some degree. But what I also heard was an interesting facet of anyone who focuses on an outcome, where they're seeking change. It may not all play out perfectly. It may not be a smooth, linear path, but you're still moving forward. But you might not see all of the visible changes as you're moving forward, because there are adjacent changes. If you strip down some of the alcohol intake on a 24-hour cycle, of course, sleep improves. And so, if you go back and have one extra drink the next day, your sleep doesn't like instantly crash and you forget how to sleep properly. All of these little adjustments in our lives, everything that we do to become a better person, doesn't always become immediately visible. In fact, we can kind of get a bit disappointed in ourselves because all the effort that we're pouring into something doesn't pop up right in front of our nose, but it's popping up all around us, adjacently, and more often than not invisible. And I'm not even going to address the adjacency of everyone who surrounds you, who benefits from, almost invisibly benefits from your efforts, Jason. And so it's not, and this is now not directed specifically at Jason, any goal that you set for yourself that you're moving towards that you may feel like, I'm just not where I'm supposed to be right now. You are. You're just not seeing all of the things that you've created on the good path towards the outcome that you're seeking. And so the second piece that I would like to say, because it was fascinating as Mark was relaying his point, and I truly feel that he's correct in the sense of scale, but it's kind of how I was trying to put across the atomic version versus the skyscraper version. At scale, as a young person, you either get with a program or you lose your business to some degree. And you have to almost become like guerrilla warfare. You have to be highly adaptive, fluidized, kind of intense, and kind of not on the clock. You're working like a dog 27 hours and 24 hours of the day. And anyone who's been an entrepreneur understands that. But as you get bigger, you kind of get safer, and you don't make those dicey moves, we'll call it. And in so doing, your learnings kind of start compressing in on you. You're not out there on the left and right flank doing the recon, learning all the hard lessons. You've kind of pulled back to the rear echelon, living your safe life as a big deal corporation. Well, as humans, we can all do that as well. We can start to believe that we're the big deal corporation now. We've gone through our entrepreneurial phases of life, and now we're stable. Now we got it together. Now we know what's up. Then we're trying to change other people when really we're only about a third of the way through our own journey, and we believe we're a corporation. And so that's how I was trying to tie the two things together. I don't think I did it very effectively, but I think it's something that we can play with because I do feel there's some truth to it.
I'm tracking. I think I was when I first came up with this the concept for the show. One of the things I was thinking about was when I started the podcast or when I started podcasting in general, was I was looking around and I kept seeing a problem. I just there was something wrong that I needed to solve. Something needed to change. I was seeing my buddies who were vets who were really struggling, people who were not getting what they needed, information they were getting. And then eventually, like Shaun said, I got to a point where I thought okay, I got this down. This is good to go. And then Shaun came along and decided that we were going to do a show a day every day for a year. And that totally changed my concept of what it was to do a podcast in general. And the change was hard and it was extremely difficult until 6-7 months in, and you kind of relax to it and you're get used to the program. Okay, cool. But Shaun would then introduce more change and it would be very disturbing throughout the whole thing. But now to this point, we're here, we're discussing change. This is a very easy conversation to have, and it's reflecting directly onto my experience on this, and I'm loving where we're going with this.
Chets, if you don't mind it, that's a super important aspect of probably this entire conversation is the full circleness of the observation, the feedback loop, if you will. You can work like a dog till the day you die and think that you're doing good things or don't think that you're doing good things, and you'll never know unless you have a feedback loop, unless you check in, unless you establish. We used to call them, in fact, I was telling Doreen last night, PO checks, performance objective checks. In a day, in one of my former careers, we would have so many PO checks in a day. It was like there was something wrong if you weren't being PO checked. Like if you weren't being tested against the standard that hour, it felt like someone check me. So am I good to go? Am I meeting that high standard? Can I surpass it? How come I'm not being tested right now? Once you're in those kind of environments, you kind of miss being tested or checked. But if you've never been in those environments, like a test can feel like obtrusive. It can feel onerous. And so, you can naturally come to the conclusion that the program is to some degree worked, kind of by accident. You've come to that conclusion, or we should all be doing feedback loops on ourselves pretty regularly. Maybe not every day, but pretty regularly, so we all know what's up.
I dig it. I like it. Mark, you got any thoughts on any of this?
You're hitting what I was thinking of. It's what we all do, and again, it could be an organization, it could be an individual. If we just look at that and try to evaluate how we're doing without having that feedback or connectivity to the environment, like this is the way I've always done it. This was enough. It might have been enough 5 years ago. And Chance, you maybe think of it with podcasts too, like how the social media community continues to evolve with, when like TikTok came on the scene, when streaming became a big deal 10 years ago. What we're doing today may still be fine in 5 years, but it may not fit the environment the same, and if you don't have that feedback loop, as Shaun said, you could really deceive yourself that, well, it's been working for a really long time, so I don't think I need to change.
I like that. Jason, you got any points to add on this?
Yeah, I like the feedback loop analogy, because that truly, Shaun brought it up, and you were right. You nailed it on the head. It's that, I've gone like this throughout my journey. But I think the feedback loop is important as we're going through it. The one thing that I would say in the beginning, though, that is helpful is okay. I'm thinking about when I was thinking about this was teaching my son how to hit a baseball. You can't just give him a bat and say, go hit the ball. You have to teach him and give him an example and say, hey, here's what right looks like, and this is the new standard, right? And I'm trying to make this an analogy for an organization or an individual. but giving an example. So the law enforcement agency that I worked for, we had a new sheriff come in about halfway through my career, and he said, "Hey, we are going to be a premier law enforcement agency." And of course, all of us thought, "Well, I thought we were," and that was the goal. But there was no really like, "Hey, here's what premier look." I could look up the definition of premier, and we could try to obtain that. But what does it look like to you, and what should it look like for us? Because one, we didn't know what it looked like, and we couldn't look around and see it, right? So the standard that we already thought was premier was obviously not, because we needed to reach that level. And it's like Nick Saban's example of, he's created some very excellent premier teams, and it wasn't, we're going to win the national championship. It's, we're going to show up to practice with our shirt tails tucked in, because that's what a championship team looks like. It's here's the examples, and here's how you need to conduct yourself to reach that level of change, because he uses those examples to change culture, and this is how you should do it. It's, if we're all going to get there, we have to set the example, and then also follow that example.
And I love what you're saying, but I'm also thinking that if we create standards to such a degree, then we create situations that don't allow for change, right? Because if the standards become set in stone, this is what happens to big corporations, big organizations, the military, fire department, like all of these things. You create a standard, this is what needs to be achieved, and then it stays that way for a long period of time, and things are advancing on the outside world, right? And we look, I was talking to a buddy of mine about police training. As you're going through the training, is you're getting the basics, kind of like we got in basic training in the military. You're getting pieces of it. You're not getting the full scale of what you will become. You're getting a small portion of it. Everyone kind of agrees that basic training is not enough. You know what I'm talking about? Shaun, what do you got? You got some.
So, in units that I've worked with, like good units, the saying is the standard is the standard, but it's the minimum standard. And so you've got to meet the standard, man. But that's just like the start line. Let's see what you've got beyond the standard. So just like podcasting, this is the standard. You show up with a freaking microphone and a camera. Okay, now you're a podcaster, bro. But you're not. You just own gear. That isn't the standard. It's not even the minimum standard. So if the standard is to show up with all the gear and then have some ideas, how you put it across beyond that point is moving beyond the standard. Fortunately, James Geering is here on this panel, so it allows me to make this point exceedingly well. When I first started podcasting, I was horrific at it. And then very early in that diabolical phase of all kinds of imposter syndrome, and I just want out of this stupid social media game, I got invited onto James' podcast. And James' podcast is a big deal, like Behind the Shield. Like, I looked it up and I thought, oh no, I don't want any of this. I don't want that. I don't want to be on such a big platform. I don't want to be on a podcast that's super squared away. I don't want to be on with James Geering because I didn't have my act together. And James, if he was being honest, would confirm that I did not have my act together. It was shambolic, man. It was so bad. And so, what is interesting about all of this is that now I can look at James and I still consider him as a standard. That I am not trying to be or trying to seek or trying to meet. I just consider him as a standard. One of several who I now act as standards within this game that we're all playing right now. And I'm not looking to surpass James. He's just a standard that I hold as, that guy's good to go, and I can learn a few things from him. And hopefully one day I can put it all together and not beat James, but at least stand next to him and feel like I've earned my part, earned my way. I deserve to be here. And I think that is one of the key aspects of change, is what is driving your change. Because if you just want to beat someone, well, you're on the road to ruin. If you're in the game of change because it's about your internal world and how you want to make this the game so that it reflects externally for others. There are so many ways to consider the whys and wherefores. But again, fortunately, James is here on the panel to illustrate that now I feel like at least I can hold a seat at the same table as James, whereas before I did not. But holy moly, that took hundreds of podcasts. And so nothing comes easy and nothing comes fast in respect to notable change. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. James, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, firstly, Shaun wasn't a shambles at all. He's being, overly humble or almost meek, as they say, and I'm in danger of straddling that line too. But I think it's a good illustration, though. He didn't feel comfortable, and that's a whole different conversation, because now you're talking about humility and you're talking about courage. Because I hit record on episode 1. I actually, ironically, just reposted my very first one the other day. I've been doing it as a bonus episode. I'm listening, and people say to me, "Oh, is it horrible listening to your early times?" It's like, no, because that was how good I was on episode 1, episode 100, episode 1000. But it takes courage. It takes courage to go on a podcast. It takes courage to ask someone to be on a podcast and figure out the right questions. And I think that again is really behind this whole change thing. And I know it's so cliche, but being comfortable, being uncomfortable is where we were put as young police officers, soldiers, whatever it was. That was our world. And yet we do become comfortable, and we stay in ranks, and we stay in administrative positions, or we stay as, CEO positions in a company. And you're like, I kind of like this comfort now. But that's not what got you to that point in the first place. It's not guided you to a SWAT team or a tier 1 organization, or, just simply a good firefighter, a good paramedic. And it kind of reminds me, when you guys were talking, I did martial arts, and I started karate and then taekwondo. And taekwondo, I won national championships. Now, let me be very clear. In that organization, at my weight, at my belt, so now we're narrowing that field. It's not like I was champion of the entire British Isles. But, I had all these trophies, and they were like, "Oh, you're actually the karate kid now." And then I tried boxing, and I got my ass kicked. And I tried Muay Thai, and I got my ass kicked. And I tried jiu-jitsu, and I got my ass kicked. And then I realized, oh, this is how you grow. You go back to being bad. That takes courage, and it takes humility. So I think what I'm pulling from a lot of the responses we had so far is, that standard in the fire, for example, we call the certification to be a firefighter the minimum standard. And the problem is, one of my guests said recently, is that's become the maximum standard. That's a whole other conversation. But if you're really going to be talking about change and growth, I think it's never letting go of that humility and that courage that got you to toe the line the very first day on the drill ground. And you use it throughout, not just your career, but as a parent, as a partner, all aspects of your life.
Bam. I freaking love that. Jason, I'm going to come back to you now. Any other thoughts?
I like what you said about the standard thing, and I was kind of trying to compare to what Shaun was talking about with the the higher level and then the lower level, because I feel the exact same way. I think that what we've done a lot of is setting a standard and then making that just like let's not touch the standard. Let's just use that as our measuring stick, and I think that's completely wrong. And so I think change has to be built into part of the whole equation of once we identify there's an issue, once we identify that there's a problem with a person, equipment, a tactic, whatever we do, then that part of that has to be incorporated into the whole thing. So in law enforcement, it's a perfect example, and I say in law enforcement, and other industries have the exact same issue, which is it's kind of like being a firearms instructor. If I have a whole line of people and I have them do all the same things, and I have them reload at the same time, and I have them do blah, 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 well, that's easy for me, right? But it's not. They're not getting anything out of it. So managing how we're going from one to the next is part of that equation. I guess I kind of trying to loop that back to my original, but I don't think it's working very well. So
it's all good. We're tracking. Mark, you got any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there. I'm going to jump on what James said. The use of the word courage is fantastic. That really keyed in on it. and it goes back to the conversation we had a minute ago about fear too. Again, an individual or an organization needs to have some degree, I'm going to use the term bandwidth, to display courage, to expose themselves to something that is either not going well, that they're not doing well, or they're unfamiliar with, uncomfortable with. And that does take a degree of courage. And organizations can, again, bigger organizations can insulate themselves from that to avoid that. Jason, you said something a while back talking about, we're going to be a premier law enforcement agency. And that made me think of a lot of my military experience. I've seen tons of military units that said, we're going to be the best, we're going to be the best unit. We're going to be better than everybody else. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good enough, though, just because, maybe everybody else stinks at what they do, but we're going to be the best one. And it's an interesting quantification of just trying to be premier or the best and not really having a grasp of having intellectual honesty. Like the best organizations I've ever been a part of were the ones who could actually say, hey, that didn't go well yesterday. That wasn't good. We need to rethink what we're doing or do it better, or rethink how we're doing it to get a better end result. And in those organizations, when everybody could just do that and there was no concern for saying it wasn't perfect, the bad organizations I've been a part of at times, and I haven't been a lot of bad organizations, they were the ones that if you looked at their track record, everything was always perfect. Everything was always great. And it made them probably feel good, but it didn't yield a true result. And it led to a lack of adaptability and a lack of growth.
This it reminds me at one point in the engineer unit, we were designated a no-fail unit. So like nothing that we were given could ever not succeed, which led to a number of injuries and a number of things that troops being put in very dangerous positions. And it didn't reflect well on some of the people in charge in that regard too. So I'm tracking with you when everything is supposed to be perfect, or you can't do anything wrong, then it becomes pretty awful. Shaun, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, what you said, Chance, is interesting because I think that, the scope of a no-fail mission or a no-fail unit or a no-fail task or a no-fail individual, we pull in that person who's the no-fail person. I think it's important to have labels like that. I really do. Now, that doesn't mean that it produces the idealized outcome. There could be a failure. But I mean, we need people and teams and organizations that have the label, maybe it's only a temporary label, but it says no fail. Now, within that no fail label, there has to be bandwidth to be able to adjust and adapt within the construct of the no fail task, where there's room to maneuver. Why I feel no fail things go wrong is because it's shot like an arrow rather than shot like life. And so if you're a no-fail arrow, freaking guaranteed you're failing, brah. If not today, tomorrow, next year, whatever. You're failed. But no-fail with liberty, with flexibility, with commander's intent to have enough adaptability in the moment for you to make it happen so that it gets as close to no fail as possible. Yeah, we need those things. And so often it's not the issue of no fail. Often it's the issue of poor description, poor management, poor leadership, poor verbiage. And so no fail is okay with me. It's how it's put across.
I'm down with that. I like that. You bring up a great point. As I finished saying it, I looked at you and I was like, wait a minute. There are things that are no fail, and that's okay. But you're right. It is the administration of it, right? How do you actually work units like that? And unfortunately, the standards as to which we were being upheld were not to that level. So it makes perfect sense as to why things would fail.
Chance, can I comment on what Shaun was just saying? So I can't help but think back to a long time ago. I was in within American Special Forces. I was obviously different units, and I was in a different unit that had a no-fail mission, and we were brutal to each other. And I remember one time, and we failed in training routinely, and we scrutinized it in an insane manner. It was the most honest unit I've ever seen. Every single day, everything we did was a contest. Every day that we shot, we printed out the results, and they were in the hallway with the top 3 guys highlighted and the bottom 3 guys highlighted. And if you're in the bottom 3, you got a warning that's got to stop. Physical fitness, every single thing was competitive. And I remember once this general officer came to visit us, and he was a special forces guy too, but he had never been in this kind of unit. And he listened to us after a training event in AR, and he was stunned. He goes, "You guys are so brutal to each other." And we looked at him like, "What are you talking about?" And that's the way I perceive the difference of, hey, no fail doesn't mean we gloss over everything and make everything sound great. It means we're constantly adapting and scrutinizing and evaluating and being honest and producing good results, versus I've seen the same procedures put to other units that suddenly everything they produce sounds like a glaring success, and they don't see the damage that does.
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly.
But the devil's advocate is this, and I'm not devil's advocating Mark, because what he said is like actual fact. But where it becomes problematic, or the devil's advocate as to that's a great way to live, is if you're always going to live in that organization, but you're not. Eventually you'll leave it, and then you'll be out on Civvy Street, and then you'll be talking to your wife a few years later. And you'll be hitting her with the same jive talk. You know, you'll be that guy who's like doing running the AAR like a freak. It doesn't work. Not everyone is ready for that sort of brutal, and it is brutal, team room feedback where there is no duck dodging and diving. But I loved it, man. I loved it so hard that I just wanted the entire world to be like that always. But it isn't. And so the change actually, conversely, is I then had to change to not be the thing that I wanted to be, to not live how I like to live. And so I came from like here and went to what I wanted, and then had to come back to here again. It's like a double change. And so no one can understand that until they live that iteration. And then when you so casually, so if someone so casually states, I love hard feedback. Have you been in hard feedback? And so change is an interesting thing, and what triggers change is an interesting thing. But for myself, in respect to what Mark just said, I feel like certain change agents definitely need a rotary dial that can be adjusted to meet the crowd, as it were.
I dig it. I want to ask specifically about particular units like that, and I want to get across the board here too, because those types of units can become very insular, right? They can become very wary of anybody that's not a part of that, which then creates issues for if there are actual, how do we put this? Let's say there's negative things going on within that unit, and somebody needs to be a whistleblower. Somebody needs to speak up and say something, right? And that would require a lot of drastic change within those teams. So, and similarly to with James, you're talking about the fire service, and I know how much you've put your blood, sweat, and tears into changing this. It's not an easy go when you're the guy that stands up and says, whoa, this is not okay. We got to shift this. So I want to throw that concept at you guys and see what sticks on it. James, I'm going to hit you first. What are you thinking?
I'm going to use an analogy to kind of dovetail off what was said, and then we'll go to exactly what you were asking. But it was interesting when we were talking about the no-fail missions, because, you know, I don't know the backgrounds of everyone here, but I would imagine there were certain times where, you know, the operation had to be met, otherwise there was going to be catastrophe. And it's the same in police, it's the same in fire. But that doesn't, like you said, like Shaun was saying, that's not a straight arrow. What that is, you know, and I think this is the same in all our professions, is it's really having a mastery of the basics, and then understanding that there's redundancy in your plan. There's the ability to shift, have a plan B, a plan C. So ultimately you still get there. And the analogy that I was thinking of, we're talking about the ultimate no-fail mission is Alex Honnold on El Capitan. Like, that was a no-fail mission. Like, he had, you know, two options: get to the top or fall off. That was it. So, but you look at the diligence in training, and you look at the humility that he had to go, nope, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Okay, what do I need to change? How can I get stronger? How can I, build my fingertips, whatever it was. And the ultimate goal was from A to B, but to Shaun's point, the journey was all over the place, which would be a SWAT operation, a fight in a house fire, whatever it was, would be the same thing. So, and I'm kind of blanking on the original question that you just asked me, Chance, but that was the first part. And to Shaun's point, yes, we were in these high pressure environments, but you can still take those principles and apply it in a more gentle way as a parent, as a partner, whatever. But you're going to have to remind me the question you just asked me, because I was so fired up to use that Alex Honnold analogy that I've totally forgotten what you just asked me. So could you repeat it, please?
It's all good. Yeah, I will. Basically, what I was asking was, being a whistleblower or being the person that stands up in an organization that says, hey, we need to change. How does that, what type of person does that create? What type of, or not what type of person, but what kind of person is the one that would stand up to that kind of pressure? Because it sucks to be that guy. That's what I'm going to come back to you with.
Yeah, it's moral courage. That's it. Everyone can follow the river the way it's flowing. But for example, in my world, when you start burying your friends and you hear the bagpipes over and over again and the last calls and the bells, there's a certain point where you go, this isn't working. And you're looking around and everyone's, so great at putting funerals together and so awful at preventing them. And so then it comes to the point of well, how brave are you? Are you brave enough to stand and say, the way we're doing it is wrong? It's not working. And to your point, when I got hired post 9/11, that's just what it was. No one even questioned it. So it worked back then. It really. Hope you guys are still hearing me talking.
Gotcha.
But it really does take that courage, to stand up, because you are part of strong.
Oh, we lost him again. Dang it!
You lost me. You got me back again now.
We got you now, but I think I got what you were trying to say there. Yeah, we'll get you back here in a second. Mark, you got any thoughts on anything?
The moral courage is a great point. It's the impact and role of leadership.
I'm going to switch devices.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think it's the impact and the role of leadership to be able to provide that cultural, the right organizational culture, to be able to chart the right course, to be able to determine, provide the intellectual honesty, provide the safe space and the stability and resilience in an organization that, hey, we can question what we're doing, and also I think gauging, it's the leadership's responsibility to determine how much is too little and how much is too much, and to find that right sweet spot of, hey, we've got to be able to adapt and have introspective on ourselves.
Like it. Jason, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, the moral courage, I think I'll just echo that again, because I think that's the biggest thing. Some of the best teams that I've been on, and as far as the other thing I think that goes with that is being able to drop the ego. I think that's where a lot of problems come with change, is the ego. Somebody said it earlier, that's the way we've always done it. If you tell me that, I will find a way to prove you wrong. That's just, I hate it so much. I heard about this agency in the not too long ago, that when they had an issue, and this was kind of cool, it really kind of breaks down the leaving the egos out, and let's try to figure out how to make this better. Because law enforcement truly is a no-fail. We were talking about a no-fail thing. It's just like he said with the fire service. We cannot fail. We do at some degrees, but people, either us or the public, ends up paying the price for that, right? So this agency was, hey, every time we need to solve a problem, and we're sitting here and we're just going around the table and nobody's actually solving any problems, their idea, and they stuck with it and worked, is we're going to bring the newest guy, whether it's one day or whether it's 1 year, the newest guy that we have, we're going to bring him in and read him in on the problem, and we're going to get his opinion on how do we make this change. What do you see? And I've always thought that was absolutely amazing, and I actually kind of carried that over into some of the things that I did. it kind of made me mad as far as like, when he said it earlier, burying people, friends and stuff like that. The thing that used to make me, I had, wanted to stand up against and say, this needs to change, the moral courage. I'm like, hey, this is wrong and you're doing it wrong. I don't care who you are, if you're the top or, my direct line supervisor. It makes me mad. Sorry, I was trying to two thoughts here. It makes me mad that that nobody else saw the same need for change. I think that's what really kind of fired me up and got me passionate about is I need to change everybody's mind to make them understand that this is something that needs to happen. But it baffled me that nobody could see it. And I think that makes it frustrating for a lot of people. It's kind of like the whole weight loss journey. People start and they don't see the results, and so they just give up, right? So you got to have the follow through, and I kind of said it earlier, was being able to get people on that side of this needs to change, because people get comfortable, and it's easy to get comfortable. I think Shaun said it earlier. But being able to get people to see that point and say, yeah, I'm tired of this too. Let's go change it.
I love that. That's it is one of the most aggravating things, is seeing a problem and no one else sees it. Like it is aggravating, but being able to engage and try to change that is super important. Shaun, you got any thoughts on any of this? And then
Yeah, I do, because Jason raised a really good point, and in respect to bring in a new guy, bring in the day one guy, and let's see where that goes. But you know why that doesn't work 9 times out of 10 is because the new guy has just stepped into a room full of old guys, and he's looking around like he's being hunted. Now, maybe he's super confident, or maybe he's super squared away, or maybe he's oblivious. But whatever it is, when he sits down and starts rattling off what his ideas are, he's now in a moment that is consequential for him, whether he understands it or not. Because everyone that's surrounding him right now as he puts out his ideas is going to be evaluating that person. Not his ideas. They're evaluating him. And so, more often than not, when you get an old system looking at a brand new system, the system isn't looking at the ideas. It's looking at the person who's coming with the ideas. And so, the idea can work if the person that they're looking at is squared away. But if the person isn't squared away and it's the best idea in the world, that idea doesn't go anywhere. Because if you walk in the room and you look like a slob, your shoelaces are undone, you've got a bad haircut, half of your face is shaved and the other half isn't, and you show up with the best idea in the world, that crowd will eat you alive based on just the human, not the idea. And so that's what I feel when you look at kind of the two ends, brand new person, old system. When they're starting to interact, it's more often not the idea, it's the personality. It's more often not the idea, it's the what message does this send. And so I love good ideas, man, but the idea has to be put in a place where it can flourish, not where it can feel like it's being hunted. And I'm not saying that's the case for Jason's scenario, because maybe that organization found a way to bring in a new person and make them feel like they're valued and their opinion matters, and we're going to listen to you, and we're not going to judge you. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of push-ups for what you said. The person has to feel that way for it to work. And so it's an interesting dichotomy. We want fresh ideas, but we crush fresh ideas because you're fresh, if you know what I mean.
I dig that. Mark, you look like you got something to say. What do you got?
No, it's just Shaun's bringing back a lot of memories. Because I've been that guy a couple of times where someone said, "Hey, what do you think?" And I was the newest guy, and yeah, he's exactly right. Like everyone's like, "That guy's dead. We're taking care of that guy after this," But it made me also think about some experiences of why sometimes leaders don't accomplish the change they desire in an organization, and particularly like I was an officer trainer. I was an instructor for officers twice. And officers have a great tendency to come into an organization and chart this lofty end goal, but fail to chart a path how to get there. So like, yes, you said we're going to become a spectacular unit and we're going to do great things and we're going to maintain the standard, all these great things that I loved hearing, but you didn't chart out, it's like building a bridge and I'm only going to build the far end. I'm not going to start on this side of it. And it takes a degree of connectivity this goes back to the first thing you said, Chance, when we started this discussion, like at the grassroots level, the people who know things, to be able to connect the dots to get to that point and not just always have this carrot dangling 10 feet in front of us that then the next guy is going to come in and propose a new carrot 10 more feet in front of us. It's harnessing the people who actually know, I'll say the grassroots level, to be able to implement things. And I forget who said it. I don't know if it was Shaun or James that said something about progress. Also I'll say leaders forget sometimes you might chart this fantastic goal and idea, but it doesn't seem attainable right now. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't start then implementing small changes that still have an impact. And it was the tucking the shirt in that made me think of it. Tucking in the uniforms. Somebody could look at that and be like, that's just ridiculous. It's meaningless. Somebody else would look at that, myself, and say, those are the little acts that create a pattern that start to chart a direction. And in a lot of cases, I think it creates a culture and a mindset that helps you get to that change that you're hoping for. And there's so many great examples where it might not seem it at the moment. It could be weight loss is the same thing, or struggling with any kind of, addiction, drugs, alcohol, that kind of thing. The day-to-day actions might not feel like they're actually getting to where you want, but experience still tells people, stick with the routine, stick with these small steps until it starts to materialize into something bigger.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I see this in jiu-jitsu quite a bit with some of my students that get really frustrated after, a year and a half, and they're still getting their butt kicked every single day. And they're just like, man, what is going on? And you're like, no, just wait. Some new guy's going to show up and you're going to trounce them and you're going to go, oh, right, there it is. But because you don't see the progression, it can be difficult to maintain. James, you got any? Shaun, what do you got?
Something about courage that we haven't said, but I know we all understand. And so I'm going to say it externally or implicitly to some degree so that others who are going to listen to this later can also think about it a little bit. The subject of courage came up, and how relevant is that to change? Well, extremely relevant, but where does your courage come from? And so, of course, courage is generally driven from internal to external, but courage can come from your external circumstances as well, as your friends or peers or teammates who are looking at you in that moment demand courage from you, or at the very least expect it. And so if you're a solo player out there doing your thing and you're looking for courage and you can't find it, well, go find a group of people who will demand it, who will expect it of you. And perhaps you can't produce it to the level that they need or want or would hope for you to have. No big deal. They'll squeeze it out of you anyway. One way or another, they'll get courage out of you. It might take a day, might take a week, whatever. But there's going to be new courage in front of your nose at the end of the process. And so, courage doesn't necessarily come just from you. Courage comes from those around you as a supportive element to teach you, to guide you, to almost let you emulate to some degree. One more piece on courage, and Chance, this is for any of your BJJ students. If you ask them to be courageous in the moment, they might be. But if they're a team player and you ask them, dude, come on over here, I just got to have a chat with you. Look, I need you to demonstrate courage for that person in the corner right now so that they can see it, because they're struggling right now. I need you to step up to the plate and exemplify for them. Now, you can say it a whole bunch of ways, but in essence, courage can be created by you asking others to create it for the people in the corner that are desperate for it.
I love that. James, you got any thoughts?
Firstly, if I suddenly disappear, that means my phone's dead. I've already switched devices once, so I apologize. It's an interesting concept. Where does the courage come from? And I think this really aligns with the same conversation that we have as far as transitioning out of uniform. A lot of people struggle with it because they perceive that they've lost their tribe, they've lost their purpose, they've lost their, their identity. And one of the things that I realized after, having that kind of ego death for a little while after, because there's no shirtless podcaster calendar out there. No one cares that you're a podcaster. But then you realize that the mission hasn't changed. And that reframes it. I just wore a costume. I just wore a firefighter's costume for 14 years. But the mission was I didn't want people to suffer. And if they were going to have their worst day, I wanted to be there. I did it as a young man. I did it as a lifeguard. I did it as a firefighter, as a paramedic. And then now, on a more macro level, it's trying to fight for all the firefighters, all the paramedics, and think about the ripple effect of the lives that they're going to save if they have great health, great mental health, their marriages are intact, their relationships with their kids are good, the level of performance that they're going to operate, the longevity of their career. So it was about the mission. And I think that's where you can also find courage, is if there's a disconnect between your mission. I want to make the world better. I want to be the best firefighter I can be. I want to, alleviate the suffering. And all of a sudden, what you're experiencing in a fire station or a department or a military unit doesn't line up with that anymore. I think that's where some of the courage comes from. It's like, well, you've kind of lost your way. You're burying your head in the sand. It's getting worse. You're refusing to acknowledge it. If I can't change it from the inside, I'm going to change it from the outside. And I'm going to have to step away from the tribe. I'm going to have to step away from the benefits and the pensions and all that stuff, because it doesn't align with the most important thing, which is the mission, the thing that's burning in your heart. So I think it's interesting because it is a culmination of everything from, in vitro forward. And I think that's where some of that moral injury comes from, is when there's that misalignment between the thing that you thought you were doing with that shield on your chest and what's actually happening in real world. And so if you can be a voice from within, fantastic, if that's all it takes to change. But sometimes you have to stand up and really, go against the grain. And maybe it requires taking the uniform off. But I think that, the real courage comes from, why are you really doing what you're doing? And if the mission is truly solidified in your heart, then when it doesn't align with an organization anymore, that's when you're like, all right, call it whistleblower, call it disruptor, whatever you want to call it. But I refuse to just shrug my shoulders every time another one goes. So, is that courage? Maybe, maybe not. Or is it just being dogmatic about the very mission that made you toe the line in the first place?
I got a great
Well,
question.
James, what do you think? How would you categorize it? Because you threw out an open-ended question for the audience, but you didn't answer it for yourself. And I'm interested in you answering it for yourself so that I can gain from your thought process.
I think from the outside, it looked like courage. I think from the inside, we also know that there's an intrinsic reward system when you feel like you're doing the right thing, which is interesting, because when people will die on their sword, on selfishness, on narcissism, you're going against your own biology. We all know that, if you hold a door for someone, if you help someone, stand up who's fallen, if you bring some food to someone who clearly isn't going to be living under a roof that night, whatever it is, it feels good. So there's almost a selfish element to that. Is it, pure courage? No, there's a feel good point. When I'm driving home after a 24, 48-hour shift, knowing that you made a difference in someone's life as a firefighter. Maybe you just put a Band-Aid on a kid's knee that fell over in a playground, or maybe you stuck a tube down someone's throat and actually saved their life. For us, like I said, I think the word courage is almost perceived more from the outside. Yes, it takes acts of courage sometimes to do what we do, but really, again, it's like, no, I this is the right thing to do. So I think moral courage is a better description. I know what the true north is through again the things that I've gleaned and my beliefs, and what I've seen make people smile and what I've seen make people cry. So yeah, it's a existential question, really. What is courage in the first place? Because it is self-serving, but your kind of timeline has set you up in that particular profession to be able to go into a burning building, to be able to walk towards gunfire. But it really, again, boils down to the fact that when we lay our heads on our beds at night, we know we made the world a little bit better. So there is that kind of self-serving element too. But I think the term moral courage is important because there are a lot of people that will set up barriers and resistance to actions that are going to do good, because whether it's a financial gain, a power gain, whatever it is, and when you're really swimming against the current, that's where the real courage steps in, So I think it can be perceived more like courage from the outside, but it's certainly, again, circling around to an earlier part of our conversation, you are voluntarily going to in an immense amount of discomfort when you put your neck on the line to be, a disruptor, to say enough is enough. We've got to do something different. And if you're not going to listen, then I'm going to dip my knuckles in glass and we're going to start swinging until you do. So is that courage? I don't know. I'll put it to the rest of you.
I'm digging this already. Like, all right, well, let's post it to everyone else. Jason, what is your version of courage? Where does that come from? What is courage to you?
I can tell you that his example, that's exactly how I ended up doing what I did. Was I did a serious internal evaluation, an inventory, if you will. And I just decided that the change that I know needs to happen in the career field that I've chosen, I'm not going to be able to make a difference in that while I'm down in this level. I had to elevate to a different level and look and try to help from the outside. And so I think that, like he said, I do feel like courage looks a lot different from the outside and from the inside, because really it's just, somebody talked about earlier, the fear, I remember walking into our headquarters building several times knowing that nobody wanted to talk to me. It was because I was making a big deal out of something that should have been a big deal that nobody wanted to make a big deal out of. And I was okay with that. Now I was scared to go do that. But, the more you realize that, hey, I'm standing on this moral, how can I get, the biggest thing is, am I going to get a suspension day? Am I going to get, this, that? And just at the end of the day, when I feel good, self-serving is kind of like James said. But that's a true test, because I know that no matter what, when someone says, well, that's your opinion, I know, but it's the right one. And I'm telling you, there might be a different way to do it, but I'm telling you that this particular thing is being done incorrectly, unsafely, or, you're just being stupid about it. I think the courage comes from a place of, I said it early on, it comes from a place of necessity, and then knowing that you are right about what you're saying. The whole sobriety thing that I used as an example earlier, that was scary. I mean, that took a lot of courage and a lot of intentional time to get to where I'm at now. The little steps, I think, is Shaun said it earlier, being okay with, I may not see my change right now, but I'm, the courage that I have to do this is going to be to make every step of the way count, and then be able to get there and look back and say, okay, now I can help somebody that was where I was at back then, and I can help you get to the point that I'm at, because I took those little steps, and maybe you don't have to be as scared about it because I've already done it, or have that fear. So once you finally make that decision, like I did, it was like, hey, this lifestyle that I'm living is not sustainable. Okay, now no matter what I do, all those little steps, all the courage that it takes to get from here to there, it's Shaun said it comes from the people around you too, and I think that's a good thing. But I think it has to start with either those people around you saying you need to change, or you looking at yourself and saying I need to change. I think sometimes just being that example is good enough to get somebody else to say, hey, I'm ready to make that leap too.
It can be sometimes, and other times people will just look at you like crazy, which that happens quite a bit too.
I go okay with that. I was used to it, and I was like, fine. If you don't believe me, I'll go talk to somebody else.
Yeah, I'm very similar. And I want to put this up. Dan jumped in earlier and said, "Congrats, Jason. October 27th, 2009 was my last drink. It's tough on many days still today, but I wake in the mornings out fear of what the F did I do last night? Don't look at the phone. Yeah, that's not a great feeling." And carries on with, and those that point out the imperfections become the problem to those who are afraid of change. And it can happen as well. So the question I have for you guys, and I want to kind of play with this idea, is that I think, you know what? I forgot. Mark, I didn't come to you. Why don't you I need your opinion on courage. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, sure. A lot of the examples we're throwing out almost have like a negative connotation, obviously, and that's not courage is much broader than that, but it's always, the whistleblower, the disruptor. I think examples of courage come from just being grounded and connected to our true self. And the examples we're talking about where I'm going to have to, the courage is now going to have to manifest in something that's going to upset people. It still requires the individual to be very connected with themselves. I know who I am morally. I know who I am, and I'm not going to be intimidated or influenced by the group seems to think otherwise. And it could be something super dramatic, or it could be something that's just, hey, everybody, does this sound like a good idea? And that one person will be like, I'm not going to go against the grain because I don't want to upset the group. And then, it can be a much more traditional picture of courage of doing something that is potentially putting you in harm's way because you just think it's the right thing to do. And James can kind of be like, well, play it off as a typical firefighter that's just who we are. But I think a lot of it comes to, it's because we're connected. The individuals are well connected to their own morality. And I don't mean morality being like their life and death. I mean what they believe in, and that this is good or bad. This is the right thing to do, or this is not the right thing to do. And they're less susceptible to influence. To Jason's point, the thousands and tens of thousands of people that are struggling with, I'm going to use the term addiction. If you've ever experienced that on a personal level or watching a friend, it seems obvious, like, how can they not see that their behavior is not self-destructive? And it's because the person in that moment is not connected to themselves. They're disconnected, and they can't see the reality. And, and I'm super happy for Jason, and everybody else that's made that moral courage point of, it's time to change. It's time to do something that is terrifying, to admit something that I've been avoiding up to this point. Again, I just think it's being connected to our true self.
I dig it. Now, well, Shaun, I'm going to ask you too, and then I have a question for everybody on this because I'm dying to get this question
Sure.
out.
So I know. Hang on to your hat there, Chance. So the courage aspect. Have you ever heard anyone say, that dude's a real character, man? He's such a character. What a character. I mean, we've all heard it, right? And so when you think of that character, what do you think of? It's usually someone who's a little larger than life, we'll call it. Someone who's a little out there, does kind of unusual things, we'll say. And so actually that's just that person being that person, as Mark said, to the extent where they're really being themselves. Now, if you're a real character, not like an NPC, but if you're actually a main character, if you're a character, well, does your character fit into the room? Does it mesh well with the room that you're entering into? The problem in front of you, when you step into that problem in that room, do you work well with that room? Now, it doesn't mean that you have to work perfectly with the room, but you have to be able to enmesh yourself within it in order to affect change as a character. And so the trick, I feel, is you can be like a larger than life character who can make all kinds of change in the world. But if you aren't the right person in that right room, it's all for naught. And so you have to read the room as a character to achieve the things that you want. And that takes time. Not like days in the room. It takes screwing it up time to be able to then eventually walk in the room and maybe make a bit of change. These things take decades of learning, where if you are a real character, you're going to screw it up 1 billion times until eventually you'll start learning how to do it reasonably well, and then you'll affect change. But it doesn't happen overnight. And speaking of overnight, when you put your head on the pillow, I believe it was Jason that was referring to this. If you are about to go to sleep and you're feeling good about something that you did, or you're not feeling good about something you did, that's a PO check, man. It's a performance objective check. It's a feedback loop. Now, whatever you do with the feedback loop, as you're drifting off to sleep thinking, I did a good job today, or oh man, I should have tried harder. Whatever it is, that's your feedback loop, your PO check. And if you ignore it, you're going to do the same thing for the rest of your life. PO checks are there for a reason. When you feel like, I did a pretty good job today, I think, well, do the same thing tomorrow, but better. And the PO check continues every single day. If you're not keeping yourself in check, you're doomed to the repetition of not creating change. So, my opinion on courage is I think you've got to believe that you have something to offer in the world as a main character. And then you've got to have the conviction sometimes to swim against the river to make it happen. And when it's all said and done, the PO check is how do you feel about yourself? And you may never feel 100%, but at least you're feeling something and heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I dig that. And the funny thing is that I really quite enjoy about this whole how the conversation has shifted in this is that we've come up with multiple different aspects of courage, right? We have it. You are almost forced into courage by necessity. Sometimes you are forced into courage through the team around you. Sometimes you choose courage because it feels good. Sometimes there's James, we've done a couple of shows on whether altruism is a thing. We'll probably have a third one. We'll get you back on that one. We'll talk about that. But the question I guess I have for everybody is, where's the responsibility? Where is it that, at what point do we look at change and say, that's not for me to change, or this is not going to happen if I decide to change it? Or so I guess basically, if I had a friend who was going through an issue with alcohol or addiction or something like that, and I knew he needed to change, where's my responsibility level? Where's the point that I say, well, that's his life, right? He has to want to make the change. I could drag him to rehab every 30 days and keep taking him back there, but if he doesn't want to make the change, then he won't. So where is our line? Where is your guys' line? Where does the responsibility start? Where does it end? I'm going to hit Shaun first, actually. What do you think?
Sure. Where's my responsibility lie? When the universe puts it in front of me. I'm just going to pause and let that sink in, because that's how I feel, man. Like I'm not trying to change the world. When the world shows up in front of me and I see an opportunity to change it, I will. But I'm not running out my door later today to try and change the world. I'm just not. But when things appear in front of me that need changing, I'm going to get to work. So let me try to explain that in a way that has timeline and consequence and a real case study. It's myself. So I stepped out of tier 1. I put it in the rearview mirror and I punched forward. 10 careers later, I'm now a podcaster trying to close the loop on my first career to some degree. Because when I bounced out of that organization, there's things that I wanted to change. But I punched forward. And now, almost 3 decades later, I'm still trying to affect change. But recently, there's almost 3 decades when I didn't do a freaking thing about anything in respect to my first career. I put it so far in the rearview mirror that it almost didn't exist. And it would have been that way for the rest of my life, if not for a bunch of my friends saying, hey, can you come back and get involved in social media and podcasting and try to be helpful? So I did. And now I find myself looking almost at my first career again, thinking like, should I have stayed there trying to make change? Or when I left the organization, should I have stayed like hard trying to change things every day? Or should I have just let it be? I let it be. And then the universe put it in front of my nose again about 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm allowing it to happen. The universe isn't forcing me to do anything. I'm choosing to allow myself to interact with the universe in a way that feels right to me. So I'm not like constantly swimming uphill feeling like this is such a struggle. I feel like I'm engaging in what is supposed to be in front of my nose right now, today. And when that changes tomorrow, I'll adjust accordingly. So to answer your question, perhaps, Chance, is a long time ago, I didn't think I'd be doing what I'm doing right now, but I'm allowing it to happen because the universe has put it in front of me and it feels right and it makes sense. And because it feels right and makes sense, I kind of love doing it. And so it's something to think about. Your metrics of, if what you're doing is good for you, then it should feel a certain way, and tune into those feelings and figure the rest out.
Dig it. Mark, I'm going to hit you next. What are you thinking?
That opening line about if the universe puts it in front of me, could not agree with that more. I truly believe with that philosophy. With regard to your example, this scenario of, hey, if you got a friend who is having a hard time, it's a generic answer, I'll say, but I feel like I have responsibility to try. I have responsibility to do something that's contributing to a positive outcome. I can't force the issue. I can't force the outcome, but I think I have an obligation to at least try. And then, and it's the way we all choose to live our lives, to be a positive force for good. That's kind of the way I think of it.
I dig it. Jason, any thoughts?
Yep, totally agree with those guys. There's too many people, when it happens and it's in front of me, I don't remember who said it. Somebody says, like, I'm the, you're the most qualified person to help the person that you used to be. And that's, speaking on the whole, everybody else. I think that, oh gosh, where was I going with that? Hey, can you come back to me real quick?
I can come back to you, no problem.
Thank you.
James, what are you thinking?
I think that Shaun nailed it. I really do. There are so many things that need to be changed. And this is what's interesting with the podcast is, now I'm up to almost 1,300 interviews. And so now you start seeing all these people, all these mosaic tiles and these overlaps. And if, you have all these changes that need to be made, and it actually gets distilled down to very few principles. But I think we just affect change where we can. So using that example, I've literally got a friend who's drowning in alcoholism at the moment, but he's in the UK, and it's very hard for me to communicate with him because he's either in the middle of a binge or because of his housing situation, I'm not able to communicate with him. But all I can do is try, and it's that lead to horse to water. Well, yeah, but if the horse doesn't drink, if you don't lead it to water in the first place, now whether it drinks or not is out of your control. But there's so many times where things have been put in front of me as, okay, that thing I can change, that particular thing that I'm looking at right now, whether it's being a good parent, whether it's being a good partner, whether it's stopping someone tearing around my neighborhood at 60 miles an hour and getting ready to kill a kid, I can affect those change. That's something I can do. But do I think about geopolitics? No. But if every single one of us, is trying to affect change in our own households, in ourselves first, and our households, and then step outside our front door and affect our community, now all of a sudden you're all these little atoms coming together, and now you're going to see that macro change. But to your point, when I think always try, it's like I never had a cardiac arrest safe in 14 years, but I did my damnedest to save every single person. But Murphy's Law, I was the Grim Reaper if I was your paramedic. And, you were having a AAA, or your heart was just so diseased it wasn't coming back, or you had a GI bleed, or you got nailed by a taxi, whatever it is, it's not the case. But we did everything that we could. And I think that's the difference. If it's in front of you and you have the ability to try, absolutely try. But there's a difference between trying and expecting an outcome. And there's some things that the sword that you'll die on, as it were, that do need to be pursued because you can see you're making progress. Again, back to Shaun's analogy, sometimes you can't see it, but it's working. Those seeds are being planted, and the firefighter work week is an example I would use. But there's other times where all you can do is try and it doesn't work, but you knew that you tried. You knew that you gave that person your attention, your compassion, your empathy. And maybe it didn't work today, but maybe it was a year later. And that's what I always thought of in the back of the ambulance. A lot of people that we respond to in the fire service are the most desperate in society. But maybe that was that one moment of kindness that 6 months later, there was a ripple effect and that person was able to turn a corner. So, yeah, but it all really goes back to what Shaun was saying is, really when the universe puts it in front of you, God puts it in front of you, whatever your name for this, this thing bigger than all of us. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Love it. Jason, come back to you. What do you got?
Okay, so and he helped me remember what I was trying to think of. I think you have too many people that are trying to make change, not necessarily that doesn't need to be done, but that's outside their purview. I feel like we, as a species, maybe a society, whatever you want to call it, we kind of have a bad habit of, for me, I was in active addiction when I was on law enforcement. There's a lot of guys that are actually, and I was more willing to jump out of my car and go help somebody on the worst day possible and not look internally and help myself, right? So you have some of these people that are, it's like, hey, I'm trying to make the changes, and these huge, if everybody would just focus on, either changes with themselves or within their small community, whatever that is, whether it's a team, whether it's a small town that you live in or whatever, if you can be a part of small changes within that organization to help make the bigger changes, as opposed to me just going out or someone going out and saying, hey, here's some giant things that everyone should change. Just make the change, a small change, and see what happens. See if everybody goes along with it. But if it's put in front of you and it's within your purview, then I think you're obligated to try to help and make a change.
I like that. This is it's quite fascinating for me because I've very similarly to Shaun. That's basically when there's a problem in front of me, I see it. I'm like, okay, well now I got to fix this because I just can't stand leaving it not fixed. And I want to ask you guys, for those that are, the universe has put something in front of them, they're sitting there looking at this problem and they don't know where to start, where to begin. What is your guys's first piece of advice, I guess, for anybody that is going through one of those situations that they need change, or they see change, or they're in it right now? Where do they step first? Mark, I'm gonna hit you first. What do you think?
All right. It's your question actually was feeding into what I was already thinking of. Anything for someone who is struggling with that kind of thing, I would tell you small things make a big difference. Like that, it goes back to tucking the shirt and thing. There's little things you can do that will improve your own personal mental attitude. I've had periods in my life, particularly after I transitioned out of the military, where I struggled with, I'm just going to call it emotional issues. And something that I learned that I found very, very helpful, that I still actually do from time to time, is to kind of stop and ask, have I done anything positive today? And it could be as simple as just, it could be simple as sitting in my backyard and like noticing a bird in a tree that I think is really, beautiful. I'm a big nature lover actually, but like stopping for a second to just pause and recognize something of beauty, something of goodness. It might sound really simple. It might sound really silly, but like making that a deliberate habit over the course of a week actually changes your entire mental perspective that, everything's terrible. But when you get into this mindset of making a point to identify something that's not terrible, something that's positive, something that's beautiful, it creates a pattern, it creates a habit, and it will have a longer term effect over time, which I think is very similar to a lot of things we've been talking about.
I like it, man. I like it. James, I'm going to hit you next. What do you think?
I mean, I think that's great advice. I really do. And to add to that, this medium is so amazing because now you can listen to people from all over the world with every different type of background. And so what I would add to that is whether you're an amputee veteran really wanting to go into the law enforcement community, or whether you were told you were colorblind like me and you could never be a firefighter, or whether you're struggling with suicide ideation, or whatever the things are, you're 400 pounds and your goal is to be a Delta operator one day, is just start with someone who's overcome the thing. Find someone, and this is what's so amazing about what we're doing here, what you guys have created here, what I've done with the podcast, is you can do that for free. Put in Google podcast 400 pounds military goals, and you're going to see all these things suddenly pop up. And I think that's what you need. And it's the same with the fire service. Now that we've got this change starting to happen in Florida, the kind of Boulder in the Indiana Jones story, now people are going, okay, I'm not so scared now because someone's already done it, and we're starting to see their results. So, I think we're going to do it too. And now we're having this wildfire of proactive innovation in the fire service, which I think is going to revolutionize this profession once it really starts sweeping across the country. But it all starts with, well, let me find someone who's overcome this thing. Someone that I can relate to, of course, someone in my background, my type of human, because then I think it gives people hope. If you're struggling with addiction and someone, gives you all the terms of guilt and shame, we just make good choices, get over it, suck it up, then you go, okay, well, I'm just going to be more depressed and more guilt-ridden and more ashamed, and it's going to send them the opposite way. But then you hear of some of these amazing people that have overcome addiction. And I've had them on the show, addicted to meth, went from Wall Street to living under a bridge. And then you hear, their journey back out, and you say, okay, this is what started for them, a 5-minute gratitude journal in the morning and a headspace meditation and walking the dog without their phone and AA meetings and, whatever. It's got a little deeper, psychedelic journeys. And all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, there's all these tools and there's all these people that have done it. And there's all these mentors in this community that, if I ask, will hold my hand and walk me through this journey. So I think, it's taking that first step, and it's also finding someone who's already been there, that can say, it's that whole analogy of the man in the hole, and the doctor throws a prescription and the clergy throws a Bible. And then one guy jumps in and he goes, why did you jump into the hole? He said, because I've been here before. Like, you got to find the man that's going to jump in the hole with you, or woman. I
take it. Jason, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, as far as first steps, I like that question because I do get that a lot. I think just, what James just said about the find somebody that's been there before. Everybody likes the from the rags to riches story, the hero story, and it all looks good. They use that in almost when they film films, that's the start to end. That's kind of how it goes. And then with the social media thing that James was just talking about, I think that the most effective thing that I've seen as far as helping people and the things that I watch and engage in is I don't want to see you as a black belt. I want to see your journey from white belt to black belt. And because then that tells me that, I've used the example so many times is I love playing golf, but I am terrible at it. But I finally went out and took my own advice, which was, hey, you should get a coach. And then so I went and got a coach, and now I play just enough. I play a little bit better, and now it's not as miserable when I go out and play. Not saying I'm anywhere good at it, but everybody, you like the hero story, but we always kind of forget that the hero story begins with the guy living in the mud. And, like he said, the hole. I've always used that example too of sometimes I just need somebody to sit in the mud with, or at least know that you sat in the mud at one point, and then now I can, it's I see where you're at. That's great. I'm so happy for you, but where did you start? And I like the little steps, because that's through the whole sobriety thing. That's the one thing that does small steps, and then just being uncomfortable being uncomfortable, because that's kind of how you get there, right? I'm not happy with myself or where I'm at, so I'm just going to try to pretend it doesn't exist. And so you've got to be able to see that whole thing and be able to stand up and have people say, hey, this is where I was and here's how I got here.
Well, I love it. Shaun, thoughts?
So change, how does it start, or how can you start it? Well, it takes action. I mean, no one's going to argue that. And so how do you get action? Well, that takes courage. So no one's going to argue that. So where does the courage come from? That's what we're talking about. Maybe it's internal, maybe it's external, but I'm just going to play with this a whole different way, because it's been bugging me for now like maybe 40 minutes. It's something that Jason said, and it kind of stood out in a tiny little way that you could almost ignore it if you didn't dwell on it a little bit, which is what I've been doing. It is rare nowadays that you'll hear somebody say, particularly a dude like Jason, say, not casually, but externalize the phrase, but I had to be courageous. I am courageous. I exemplified courage. I needed to be courageous, and therefore I was courageous. You don't hear dudes say that too often. What you will hear often is change requires action. Action requires courage. Go identify someone who's courageous and then emulate it. Follow in their footsteps, which is kind of what we're all saying to some degree, but we're not saying it as specifically as I just said it. And so we will look for someone courageous to go exemplify, but we won't say out loud to anyone around us, I'm freaking courageous, man. I have courage. To change today, I'm going to apply some courage. And I'm going to own my courage. We just don't do it. We just don't say it. I think we should say it more. Now, the problem, of course, is when someone without humility is tooting the old, I'm constantly courageous horn. And that gets a bit old. And it kind of dilutes the concept of, I think, honestly, a lot of men could benefit from not only being around others who are confident in saying, dude, I'm freaking courageous. So are you. Let's talk about that. I think it should happen more often. So that's the way I'm twisting it. I'm interested into what you guys think.
I like this. We did a show a while ago on courage, and you and I went back and forth on, like, you know, using very distinct words of being courageous or being a coward. And it kind of went back and forth on like little decisions and whether those things applied. And this has just been fantastic, bringing up so many memories, and I'm digging it a lot. James, I'm going to hit you. Any thoughts?
I think that that's a great point. You know, if you're going to start this journey, if you've said, I need help, that is such an act of courage, such an act of humility, you know, because there's so many people we know. I just had Tyler Gray on the show, you know, Delta operator, and his humility, you know, his search for healing when, you know, he was at the tip of the spear. I know there's a lot of people on the show that are similar. But that's a one level of courage. But we all know the most courageous thing you can do, as that Charlie McCasey, you know, there's the animation with the fox and the boy and the mole and the horse. You know, he said, what's the bravest thing you've ever asked? And he said, help. You know, it's true. You know, that is. So at that point, you are absolutely exemplifying courage because you are at your lowest point now and you've held your hand up. So I agree with Shaun completely. From that point, you have to look in the mirror, and maybe it's right before that. Maybe it's where, you know, you're considering it and you look in the mirror and you say, no, you are courageous. Obviously, what you've done in the uniform exemplifies courage, but you're realizing that there's a better version of you waiting. But it is, you know, it's hell between now and there, you know, a version of, you know, it's a crucible. You're going to have to be uncomfortable. You're going to have to do things that are, you know, humiliating or whatever it is, whatever the apologies and all the things that you've got to make from where you are now, addressing, you know, some traumas in little boxes locked away in your mind. And so, yeah, then that's the nauseating thing about the minority now, because I think it's great to see this as a mainstream conversation, but the minority that still hangs on to the, you know, well, it's, you know, if you can't handle the job, then just, you know, get out. It's not for everyone. Suck it up. Because we all know now what kind of person that is. That is the coward. That is the one that's not prepared to look in the mirror and go, I could be better, or I'm struggling. But if you value the people in your life, if you value your relationship with your children, your relationship with your partner, which goes back to change again, it's a constant evolution. You know, when we met, if you're still with the person that you met when you were young, you're a very different person on the back end of law enforcement or military or fire. And so we've had to evolve. And I'm divorced and remarried. So, you know, there was obviously a casualty of my profession. And so, yeah, I think, you know, I'm rambling a little bit, but going back to the point, I think the most courageous act is to ask for help. So you're damn right. You need to be able to look in the mirror and say you're brave because you have done the thing that even, you know, the air quotes, toughest firefighter soldier refuses to do, which is saying, you know, I'm struggling. I can't do this alone. I need help. And I think that is the ultimate act of courage.
I love that. Jason, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the you see a picture of this all the time on Instagram or wherever, social media, and it's a guy. There's two paths, and there's one guy over here, and there's everybody else over here, and it's saying be the guy, right? That's kind of doing his own thing. Now we all know that sometimes that guy can be an idiot, and everyone's doing the right thing, and he's in the wrong. But it's kind of what James was saying, and it's really kind of where I'm trying to get to is this is being able to raise your hand and say, hey, something needs to change, whether that be, we're kind of getting into this personal level type stuff, but even at a higher level, being hey, raising your hand, this needs to change. And I'll use another example of being in a room with people is, I tell people all the time, the safest, the best place that I feel, where I feel I fit in the most, which is kind of weird because I used to look at addicts as a cop, I used to look at addicts in a particular way. And now if I still go to AA meetings to now at that point where I'm helping other people, but being inside a room of people who have all raised their hand and said, I have got to change. Here's my problem. It is the most powerful thing that I get re-energized when I get to be around people like that, because they're all at that same point. They were all at the bottom, and now they're all at various stages of. Sorry, the dog started barking. They're at various stages of after. Okay, I took that first step, and now I'm here. So getting more people to open up and say, this needs to change. We need to change. I need to change. That truly, I think that is the first step. I say the admission of it, right? But being that one person and being able to say, I'm not okay with the way things are, and then being able to be around a group of people who feel the same way, it's powerful. So one, be that change. I always say be the change you want to see in the world, but be that guy that's going the other direction, and then either meet up with some other folks that are in the same place, or run your own path until you do find some of those people. But there's power in that.
100%. There's power in that. I love that. Mark, you got any thoughts?
It's fascinating how it's kind of come full circle. We've hit back on so many topics, but we've also now taken it to a very personal level of like individuals. And Jason makes me think of, I'm going to say something. I suspect you gentlemen have heard this before, but I think it's relevant. If you talk to people who may not have a lot of familiarity with this kind of topic, and you say, hey, what's the opposite of addiction? And addiction being a generic term for self-destructive behavior, let's just say. And traditionally, a lot of people will say, oh, the opposite of addiction is sobriety, versus the opposite of addiction is actually connection. And I go back, I think, whether it's an organization and now we're talking about individuals, it's the same thing. The entity can't affect change until they become connected to their own reality, their own environment, the intellectual honesty of their situation. They can't see things clearly. They can't, make judgments. And like when Jason talks about being a part of groups, like great groups like AA and stuff, it's that sense of connection that helps empower the individuals. A little bit what Shaun was talking earlier about. Sometimes it comes internally, sometimes it comes from the influence of external sources. If you want to affect change, a great way to do it is surround yourself with people who will be good catalysts or examples, versus staying with the same people that have contributed to, the rationalization of, hey, there's no need to change. So that's what particularly, Jason, what you were saying made me think of, that the way people think of it is sometimes not helpful. And a better way to think of it is being connected to ourselves.
Being connected to ourselves. We've done so many shows that have ended up with that realization that being connected to ourselves is kind of is where everything starts. And I love this. Now we're almost at 2 hours now. And I just want to say thank you guys, because this has been a fantastic conversation. I know we could probably sit here for another couple hours still and continue to discuss this, but we do have to shut it down at some point. So I just want to say, Jason, James, Mark, Shaun, thank you guys so much. This has been awesome. Have you guys any?
Hey, I got to, sorry, before you jump into finals,
okay.
I have a question that isn't a final question. We're still going to do finals.
Be a final question.
No. I love your finals, buddy. But I do have a personal question. Now that we've all been in this conversation and we've considered things, we've all listened to each other, we've probably expanded our definition of a few things. I'm curious, as to when we started on minute 1 of the show till now, what is it that you heard? Or what is it that you're now thinking? Or what is it that you're seeing just a little bit differently than nearly 2 hours ago?
Let's start with Mark. What do you got?
That's a great question. The thing that stood out the most to me, I think, Shaun, is the way you sort of encapsulated everything, the way you just kind of took what everybody said and just kind of ran it down that list. I thought that was actually really, really good. I don't know if it was particularly new, but I don't know if I've heard it categorized like that. So I think that's the thing that I took away the most.
I like it. James, what do you think?
For me, I think it just reaffirms. Here you got, all these different people from different backgrounds, different countries, all having this conversation. And again, I love it when Venn diagrams overlap. And I think that there's a lot of commonalities between everyone's perception, and the descriptions are different and the personal experiences are different, whether it's a sobriety journey or, a team room or whatever it is, but it's the same thing. And I think it's beautiful to hear, that we're pulling out these same tenets, again, moral courage and humility and empathy and compassion. And so for me, it's not that I'm thinking differently. I'm just kind of enthused how all of us are from so many different parts of the world and professions. And, ultimately it boils down to these very simple tenets of, how are you going to serve? How are you going to improve yourself? And how are you going to make a dent on the world before we take our last breath? So I think that's what I've taken away from it.
Love it. Jason, any thoughts?
Yeah, Shaun usually leave me with something to think about and write about. So, I would say the biggest thing that I've been thinking about since the beginning to now is incorporating that I am blank when I'm whatever it is we talked about, I am courageous earlier. But that, call it positive self-talk, but however we want to look at it. But going into that is I am that, right? And so I've heard that in various ways, and they tell you should, positive affirmation stuff. But the way you put it was, the intro to change is I am the change. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I've got a lot of thinking to do on that, because it kind of leads into what we were talking about also. First step, what does that actual first step look like? And so it's given me a lot to think about. We could probably do another show on it, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, linking those two things together.
We could absolutely do another show on it. And to answer your question, Shaun, the thing that I think has changed in my mind is my view on positive affirmations is what Jason was saying. And that is the same thing for me, is that I've always seen positive affirmations as kind of silly. It's never really a big thing, but to use it as a tool now, especially in depressive episodes like I'm in right now, I got a negative voice spooling in my head. And so being able to counter that negative voice with a positive affirmation that is true and realistic, like the fact that if my brain was telling me I was a coward, and I'd be like, well, no, I'm not actually a coward. I am courageous as a human being and can move forward through that. So that's what's changed for me. But what has changed for you, Shaun?
Well, many things, and I simply don't have time to articulate them all. So I'm just going to cheat, and I'm going to feed right off of what you just said, Chance, because what you just said externally, maybe you feel like a coward inside, but you're telling yourself that you have courage. You are courageous in this very moment. In your depression, you are publicly engaging in the world that perhaps you don't necessarily want to fully engage in at the moment. Like, it's truly the definition of what we're talking about. You are creating change in the real time through applying courage while externalizing that somehow you feel a little bit cowardly, but you're going to not overlook that. You're going to not defeat that, but you're going to maybe push it down far enough that you can believe, and that's enough for now, that you truly are courageous. Now, if you have the fortitude to be able to take it to that next logical leap, which is, I am freaking courageous, man. And not only am I courageous, but I'm going to exemplify it for others by what I say now. To me, that's what I'm hearing in this conversation today, is none of us have said it quite like that, but I wish we all could. I wish we all could I'm going to be courageous today for everyone, and I'm going to display it for y'all, for us, so that we all know what it's about. I'd love to see a bunch of people today be super courageous, whatever that means to them. Because then it would fill in my definition of what the world's courage or courageous actions is. Often men will think, I'm going to be courageous. They'll frickin' grab an axe and go chop down a tree, and that's their courage for the day. It is an action, but I don't look at it as courageous. And so we have almost this misattributed definition of what courage is nowadays. I'd love to see the definition of courage in real time today exemplified by a pile of people that I know in a way that they feel it means.
I dig that. I think courage and violence have been attributed too often together. And so when people think of, I'm going to be courageous, I'm going to go punch somebody in the face, and like that, well, no, that's not what it means at all. So I love that. Let's get some final thoughts then. Anything still rattling around in the back of your brain? Anything on courage, on change, on necessity, on anything that we've talked about? We've hit quite a bit. I'm going to start with Jason. You're on top. Any final thoughts?
No, yes, but I'll go next. Sorry.
Okay, I'll come back to you. All good. James, you're up. What do you got?
All right. Well, what's banging around my head, and this kind of ties in a little bit with what you're saying, Chance. But when I think of courage, and when I think of people talking about the word cowardice, I'm always reminded of the old school way that we were taught to think about suicide. So I want to kind of hit this for a moment. When, people talked about it and we lost people to it, they'd say, oh, it was so selfish, so cowardly. How could they? Think of your family. And through all the 10 years of interviews and people that have, been so close and stopped at the last minute, people that went through their attempts and survived, you hear a totally different story, because the people saying that aren't the people that, were courageous enough to come out the other end, go through healing, and then talk about what they went through. And what you actually hear is through the perfect storm of all the contributing elements, which there is not a singular one. I mean, unaddressed childhood trauma and, the stuff that we do see in uniform, and organizational betrayal, and the side effects of psych meds, and alcohol, and relationships, and finances, and blah, 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 blah. And there's this Jenga tower for these individuals. And their reality at that moment, their true reality, is that I am a burden to the people that I love, and they would be better off if I wasn't here. Which in such an ironic way makes a suicide attempt courageous and selfless, because they're in a profession where they said, I'll die for a complete stranger. Now the people that they love, they think that they are the reason for their pain, and they're going to remove themselves. So in that distorted state, and it's not a healthy brain, it's an unhealthy brain, and I mean that with compassion, that's actually a selfless and courageous act. But to a healthy brain, obviously, it makes no sense, because you add pain to the people that you love. So when you frame it that way, you realize that the real act of courage is to ask help before you get to that crisis, when you're struggling, and you start hearing that voice saying that you're, a piece of crap and they'd be better off without you. That's when real courage comes in to say, I need to ask for help. That's when courage comes in, when one of your friends notices you having that kind of behavior and saying, we need to get you some help. Because the real courage is obviously doing the work. The real courage is actually facing whatever it is that's bringing you down and working through it. And the toolbox is so immense these days. And the number of people that are just looking for an opportunity to help when they realize that you're struggling is unending. But I think it's an important thing when we talk about cowardice and courage, because we pile shame upon shame as someone who's struggling. And then we, add even more shame by calling them a coward at the end. And we've got to realize that their reality is completely distorted. But being courageous as someone who sees someone struggling, and then hopefully helping them find the courage to understand what real courage is, which is not to take yourself away, but to stay and face whatever it is you're struggling with and work through it. But you can only get that when you're pulled away from crisis. You know what I mean? So that involves other people around you. But I think that's where the ultimate courage is. That's where the ultimate change comes from, is when your very reality has been distorted by all the things that led you to that very point. And it takes a village. It takes everyone around you just to see that you're not who you normally are, to pull you away. And then for you, once you have that realization, to realize the real courage is to say, I am struggling and I do need help. So that was kind of banging around my head.
Bam. I love it, man. I appreciate it. Jason, coming back to you. What do you got?
So there's a saying, and I'm sure it's, and you guys have probably heard this before, but we used it a lot in law enforcement, is that everybody hates the way things are, but nobody likes change. And you know, that's in most organizations because they've spent so much time. It's easy to, you know, it's like sitting around gossiping. People just, you know, it's easy to sit around and talk about all the things that are wrong because it makes you feel good. But I've been in so many rooms and sat at so many tables where that's all they're doing is everyone's just identifying problems, or they're identifying things that need change. And we're just going to sit around and talk about them because everyone's so scared to move forward. There's no courage in that room that it's easier for us to sit here and just let's pretend we're trying to fix it by just talking about it, and then maybe something will happen. You know, that's one of the things that I try to get people to understand, whether it be I'm talking to them about sobriety, whether I'm talking about, you know, making changes within their organization, is don't, you know, kind of the one guy and then everybody else going the other way. The analogy I used earlier is if you find yourself in that room and all we're doing is spinning in a circle, then somebody has to be that person that can say, hey, let's look at this from a different angle. And I brought the new guy analogy earlier, and somebody, you know, I get the reasoning why that might be a bad idea. But I think that's how people get to a point in their life that you need changes, because all you've done is justify and just talk about and say, you know I eat too much all the time, but it's because of this, and because we never actually identify the root cause or go back there. Usually this is never the problem. This needs to change, but so do all of these other things. And we can't just talk about it. We've actually got to take that first step and move forward.
So what you're saying is I can't complain my way to victory? Come on now. I figured that would be a good thing to do.
All the time.
Mark, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, I wrote this down because I thought of it before. I thought I had a copy on my bookshelf here, but I think I must have given it to somebody. For anybody who's interested in a really good book that is just a series of like case studies of how big entities, and by big entities, I mean either big Fortune 500 companies or like New York City, changed problems they were facing. It's a really cool series of just examples that show how these little things had a cascading effect over time. The book's called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. It's a pretty cool book.
I will look it up. That's a great one. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Yeah, the interesting thing about that book, The Tipping Point, is that, you know, you can pick it up and you start reading it. And if you're not paying attention, by the end of the book, your mind has changed. It's just that you don't know it. Isn't that the interesting thing about life, honestly? You know, we're always changing. It's just whether we realize it or not, whether we identify it or not. And then even more fascinatingly, whether we identify how it changed. Not that you're changed, but how. What was the impetus? What was the root cause, as Jason said? What was the portion where you cross the start line on change? We just don't think about it that often, I swear. So what final point would I like to say? You know, we're talking about maybe a chunk of the conversation on being with friends and hoping that they would change, or trying to be an agent of change for our friends. I often think of this when I sit down with a friend who wants change, or has asked me to help them change. When I sit down, I get to it pretty quickly, man. We don't talk about the weather or sports. We talk about direct things, direct actions, directly looking each other in the eye and nodding on what the actions are next. So there is a reality check, there is an action list, and then there is a performance objective check. I'm going to check in with you next week. Let's see where you're at. What did you do? Did you nail it? Did you not? Okay, let's keep moving forward. So for me, the idea being, we'll identify it, action, PO check.
I like it. I think the only thing that's really not the only thing, but the big thing that's sticking into my head throughout this whole conversation was what you said earlier about when the universe puts it in front of you. And I think that's really where change begins, because if it hits you and you see something need to change, that's the beginning, and you can make the choice right there. Are you going to fix it or are you not? And I think if we were to spend a little bit more time fixing some of the thing, or changing some of the things that we see as needing to be changed, we could live in a much better place, personally, like individually, not just as a society. So other than that, I got nothing. As we all continue to learn, build, and grow. See you next week. Jimo. Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see you all next time.